Hi, my name is Gaia. I'm the founder of Inanita. It's an earth-based spiritual community and living and learning center in Nicaragua on the island of Ometepe. I'm the director of the fire season there. And at Inanita, we really look to create a regenerative community. And what I mean by that is a community that creates more for the world than it takes from the world. It's a desire it was built out of a passion really to create utopia, if that were ever possible. And one of the things I've noticed that is I've kind of become a little bit more humble. I probably won't ever create utopia. When I was younger, I thought I might. But I noticed that if I point my arrow towards utopia, I keep growing, and the people around me keep growing, and the plants around me keep growing. And so I continue this wild mission. There's a woman named Diane Leaf Christensen, and she has this quote about starting a community which says something like, developing a regenerative community will be the longest, most expensive, most intense personal development process you'll ever undertake. And I would definitely agree with her on that. I think one of the things I've learned, not knowing I would become a leader really when I started this process, I realize now that leadership is key to guiding culture and society towards something that's more regenerative. Most of our cultures are based on taking from the earth, taking from other cultures so that we can thrive. That's what communities did years ago. Tribal communities really were at war with each other. We have this kind of idealistic view that somewhere in the past there was this utopic society where everybody was at peace, but really that could happen maybe in a bubble, and then the other community would come in and there'd be this war, and it was like communities taking from each other. Humans, we have lust, we have greed, we want more. And I don't think we're ever going to really fix that in our lifetime. So the mission of creating communities is a mission to try to retrain humanity to be more of service, to be more giving. And as I rise, or as I've stepped into leadership in that arena, one of the things I've noticed about myself is that I have to be incredibly real with myself. And in order to be a really authentic, heartful leader, the most important thing I found is that I have to look at my own shadows and be aware of what drives me. When I acknowledge my imperfections and I acknowledge who I really am to the people around me, I notice that they feel more empowered to step into their leadership. We often have in our society this kind of idea that leaders are some perfected versions of humanity, or in order to step into leadership that we have to have already gotten somewhere. And actually the leader is the person, in my opinion, who shows that leadership is possible no matter where a person is. I find that humility and honesty about what I'm working on in myself as a person allows people to trust me more and allows people to trust themselves more. I lead a process called the Tantric Way, which is I don't know, some people, you could call it kind of a wickedly intense unveiling. It's an opportunity to feel it, for people to really notice the patterns and the conditioning that drive them. And I think that's one of the first steps to stepping into leadership, is to know who you are, or for me to step into leadership, to know who I am. Because when I know what my shadows are and what's driving me from underneath, I can A, share it with others. B, when other people notice it, I can acknowledge it and not need to defend myself. And I can humbly say, thanks for reflecting that to me. I know that about myself. I'm working on it. And thanks for reminding me. The leaders I want to follow are the leaders that can do that. So that's what I like to teach when I teach about leadership. I do a couple of different leadership trainings. I do community leadership trainings for people that want to start or support regenerative communities. And I also do personal leadership trainings for therapists who want to lead people deeper into themselves. And in terms of, I'm going to cheat and look at my notes. I wanted to also talk about actually how I got into this leadership position, which I kind of alluded to a little bit. Honestly, I didn't ever anticipate that I would take on the amount of responsibility that I've taken on. Being a leader is definitely about taking responsibility, not just for oneself, but for others. But my passion drove me to it. I think somebody asked me yesterday how I have this limitless well, excuse me, of energy. And I think because I've really just let my heart fully guide me in a direction, then I can't help but fully find the energy because my heart's like taking me forward. I don't imagine that I could be a leader in a place where my heart wasn't in it. I used to, for a short period of time, I was in the corporate world and I noticed how exhausted and how overwhelmed and how fucking stressed out I was. And now I work as hard, if not harder. And sometimes I do get stressed out, but when I get stressed out, like, it's like the stress is actually something I can ride instead of something that's killing me and driving me into the ground. And so if you don't feel passionate about what you're doing, don't try to be a leader in that realm. It's just, I'd say it's not even worth it. So yeah, I find that or when I was in that corporate world and I was trying to step into my power, I was driving myself into the ground because I really wasn't following my heart. And following your heart might not be being the person at the center. There are so many regenerative communities that are looking for support. You don't have to start your own. This is a collective dream that we have for Utopia. And if your passion is a passion that can fit into the passion or into a community that already exists, I invite you fully to step into that. You don't have to start your own thing. If you love to cook, become a cook who learns how to cook in a regenerative way and give your services to a community as the leader of the kitchen, the leader of the garden, the leader of the building, the leader. If you're naturally driven to earn money because it's something that turns you on, and maybe some of your shadows are a little bit about greed, you can turn that into a gift for a community. Use your greed to fund a whole regenerative community. You don't have to put your shadow in the box, just use it for good. I like attention, and I used to judge myself for wanting attention, and now I see how I can put my attention in service. People look to me, and with the energy that they give me when they look to me, I take that into myself and then I just give it back to them. So being a leader is really, that's something else that's super important. Stepping and rising into leadership is not about being looked up at, although that might happen, which always risks being thrown off the pedestal. But really being in leadership means being in absolute service to the things around you. A king or a queen of an old royal family may look really sexy and yummy, but actually the king and the queen were responsible for everyone. So if you want to step into leadership, know that it's about stepping into responsibility. And our society has almost, in a way, because of the sickness around how authority has been seen in the past, but our society, especially the alternative society that I think a lot of this event is attracting, is a bit driven by this idea that we could rebel, and rebels tend to want freedom and responsibility really go together, but sometimes we forget and we want freedom without responsibility. So that's something I'd like to caution us against. Freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. And how can you find a balance? How can you take on enough responsibility to lead yourself and others forward would be my question to you. If you want to rise into leadership, can you rise in responsibility to match it? That's one theme that I wanted to bring up. Also, I want to talk about leadership styles. There's a great book called Primal Leadership. You can learn a lot about leadership from that book. It's more of a like mainstream bestseller kind of corporate leadership kind of book, but it talks about different styles. I won't remember them all, but there's 7 styles. And it actually, what it does is it talks about the leadership by inspiration, democratic leadership, and I can't remember all the others, it doesn't matter. The point being that actually one form of leadership that can be used in the right place sometimes is if imagine there's a burning fire and everything's falling apart and collapsing around and there's a high risk. In that case, very directive drill sergeant type leadership by one authoritative person is the healthiest way to lead. There are times when that's necessary. And if you step into leadership, you're going to need to know that, and you're going to need to know when to be willing to sit in the hot seat. People point fingers at leaders. Being a leader does not mean that everybody's going to like you. Quite the contrary. It means the willingness to sit in the hot seat, trust yourself enough to sometimes let people not like you. To trust yourself so deeply, to be so intrinsically, internally motivated that you can let others question you. And when people question you, to really question yourself, come clear, and move forward no matter what the consequences are. Because a real leader lets their heart guide them. And in community, in creating a regenerative community in an age when individualism has been put as the highest goal that we could have, is, the Renaissance man, the individual has become more important than the collective. And the role of a leader in regenerative community right now is to support people to understand how to remember when it's time to put the community first and to let individuals go by the wayside. American Indians used to leave the elderly on the path sometimes when it was their time to die. Sometimes leaders have to make tough choices. So if you're willing to make tough choices, I dare you, step into leadership. So in following my passions, I find that I've actually become a leader in many different categories, so to speak. Sometimes I'm leading a bunch of Nicaraguan guys, which is what I've been doing the last couple of days, men and women, mostly men, in building and constructing things. And that brings out a certain part of my leadership. There's a big hierarchical difference. I'm the gringa lady that everybody would follow the orders of no matter what. And so in that case, one of my jobs as a leader is to remind people that they have a voice and to ask over and over again, so what's your opinion? What's your opinion? Because I'm leading a group of people who've been robbed of the opportunity to know that their opinion is wanted or valuable. And so there I get to also take on this really playful role, because there's this like big hierarchy thing. I'm the jefa. They call me the jefa. And which means that, I have ultimate power. And so sometimes it means shooting the shit and dancing and being goofy and even like bowing and dropping to my knees to just play with the idea that, guess what? It's like, I'm not better than you. It's just this role we're playing. And God, I bless you and I honor you. And I'm throwing myself on the floor before you because I really fucked it up. Can you forgive me? And in leading with that lightness in this context where there's a big power shift, I find we're really able to create a sense of family. And in another one of my leadership roles, when I'm leading these deep transformational workshops, there's got to be this delicacy, because I'm really inviting people to go into their deepest, most core wounds. And then this part of me that's this like deeply compassionate, yet sternly disciplined mother type of character needs to come out. And it's a very different aspect of myself. So I guess what I'm saying here is leadership's also about knowing the different aspects or the different archetypes that live in me and knowing when to pull which one out. And this this sort of keen, loving presence that I offer in the Tantric way in these transformational workshops is definitely a form of leadership, but it's way different from being the Hefa. It's more about being the biggest, most reflective, mirrored heart I could possibly be. And I can even hear it in the tone of my own voice. There's got to be this love. It's not playfulness anymore. Now it's just this deep love for somebody that I'm stepping in to be a leader. And the hardest leadership role for me is actually trying to lead millennials in the modern age who there seems to be some astrological shift that is inviting people to really know who they are and to feel their worth. And I think as we're all struggling to know our worth, there's a kind of entitlement that all of us are facing. How do we know who we are and know what our value is without stepping into being hyper entitled? And when I'm a leader in that role, I find myself like needing to set a lot of boundaries. Like, these are the limits, work within these limits, because in limits, the limits to what you can have and what you can do. And I often make the metaphor of a river. It's a great permaculture metaphor. A river with no banks becomes a marsh. And I think sometimes when we come from our entitled Western privilege, we lose sight of the fact that limits are necessary, because, we're like, ooh, we're free. And I come from a generation maybe that was kind of pushing at the edges, like the early parts of my youth were punk rock, for Christ's sakes. And so I'm not putting the millennials, I think they're an extension of my generation, and I'm reaping the rewards or paying the karma when I'm leading millennials in terms of noticing this rebellion that I helped to bring forward has now got a bunch of free people running around. Now, how do we merge freedom with freedom with responsibility, which pulls us back around to what I was talking about before. And that's a leadership role that I'm still trying to master. And I encourage everybody that's listening maybe to take a look. How much freedom do I want, and how much responsibility am I willing to have that level of freedom? Power. People want power. Often leaders want power. And you can only truly have power if you're carrying weight on your shoulders. And a lot of people are afraid to carry the weight on their shoulders. To be a leader means to be willing to carry weight on your shoulders. If I could impart that to my generation and the generations that come after us, and if I can be, actually, when I say that, I'm reminded of these Nicaraguan guys I've been working with for the last couple of days. They carry 200 pounds down a mountain sometimes. And one of the disturbances in our society is these people who carry the weight that's needed for us to feed ourselves don't have a lot of power. So when you step into leadership, please remember that there are people carrying weight who don't have the right to make the decisions that you make. So I ask you to carry weight on your shoulders and remember to learn to give away or to share power with others, and to look at that balance, because your leadership will be marked by how capable you are of mastering, creating a field where power and responsibility are balanced. I'm still rising into leadership. I haven't mastered all of the things I'm talking about, but I'm sure as hell trying. And I invite you to try too. And my name is Gaia, and I am the founder of Inanita. As I said before, director of the fire season. Fire season starts August 15th. We'll be here running workshops, living off the land, learning how to live close to nature in paradise with volcanoes everywhere. And I'll be leading the Tantric Way series, which is the self-development process that I pointed to. So if you want to learn more about yourself, learn about how to shift your core wounds into potential power and purpose, join me in September or January for that. And if you'd like to buy into a long-term community and try the next round, join me at Kaliland, which is a developing project of a long-term HOA-style community where you'll have the right to have your own independence inside of a community structure, while, again, living in paradise, which isn't so bad. Thanks for listening.